The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran on prayer. Let's get straight into it. Then a priestess said, "Speak to us of prayer." And he answered, saying, "You pray in your distress and in your need. Would that you might pray also in the fullness of your joy and in your days of abundance. For what is prayer but the expansion of yourself into the living ether? And if it is for your comfort to pour your darkness into space, it is also for your delight to pour forth the dawning of your heart. And if you cannot but weep when your soul summons you to prayer, she should spur you again and yet again, though weeping, until you shall come laughing. When you pray, you rise to meet in the air those who are praying at that very hour, and whom save in prayer you may not meet. Therefore, let your visit to that temple invisible be for naught but ecstasy and sweet communion. For if you should enter the temple for no other purpose than asking, you shall not receive. And if you should enter into it to humble yourself, you shall not be lifted. Or even if you should enter into it to beg for the good of others, you shall not be heard. It is enough that you enter the temple invisible. I cannot teach you how to pray in words. God listens not to your words, save when He Himself utters them through your lips. And I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains. But you who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas can find their prayer in your heart. And if you but listen in the stillness of the night, you shall hear them saying in silence, "Our God, who art our winged self, it is thy will in us that willeth. It is thy desire in us that desireth. It is thy urge in us that would turn our nights, which are thine, into days, which are thine also. We cannot ask thee for aught, for thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. Thou art our need, and in giving us more of thyself, thou givest us all." So let's get into the interpretation. Then a priestess said, "Speak to us of prayer." A priestess, symbolizing spiritual guidance, asked the prophet to discuss the nature of prayer. And he answered, saying, the prophet begins to share his wisdom on the subject. "You pray in your distress and in your need. Would that you might pray also in the fullness of your joy and in your days of abundance." People often turn to prayer during difficult times, but the author Gibran wishes that they would also pray during moments of happiness and prosperity. Prayer should be an expression of gratitude and joy as much as a plea for help. For what is prayer but the expansion of yourself into the living ether? Prayer is described as an act of extending oneself into the spiritual realm, connecting with a larger living universe. And if it is for your comfort to pour your darkness into space, it is also for your delight to pour forth the dawning of your heart. If prayer helps you release your troubles, it should also be a means to share your joy and inner light. And if you cannot but weep when your soul summons you to prayer, she should spur you again and yet again, though weeping, until you shall come laughing. Sometimes when you feel compelled to pray, it may be during moments of deep sorrow. Your soul, often depicted in literature as feminine, prompts you to connect with the divine, to seek comfort, understanding, or guidance. Your soul urges you to continue praying despite your tears, sorrows, and vulnerability. Through persistent prayer, Gibran implies that healing, understanding, and peace can be attained. The tears may eventually give way to laughter, symbolizing joy and a sense of spiritual fulfillment. This transformation suggests that prayer has the power to uplift the spirit, bring comfort, and ultimately lead to a state of inner joy and contentment. When you pray, you rise to meet in the air those who are praying at that very hour, and whom save in prayer you may not meet. When you pray, you spiritually elevate yourself, entering a realm where you connect with others who are also praying at the same time. This act of prayer transcends earthly limitations and unites you with a larger spiritual community. This spiritual connection is unique to the act of prayer. It creates a bond with others that might not occur in the course of daily life. Through prayer, you meet and commune with other souls, forming a connection that is only possible in this sacred shared spiritual practice. Therefore, let your visit to that temple, invisible, be for naught but ecstasy and sweet communion. When you engage in prayer, envision it as entering an invisible sacred space, a temple that exists beyond the physical world. Gibran advises that your purpose in the spiritual journey should be purely for the joy and bliss referred to as the ecstasy, and the profound loving connection referred to as the sweet communion, with the divine and with the spiritual community. Prayer, in this view, is an experience meant to bring delight and deep, meaningful interaction with the sacred. For if you should enter the temple for no other purpose than asking, you shall not receive. If you approach prayer solely with the intention of making requests or seeking favors, you will not achieve the true benefits of prayer. By focusing only on your desires and needs, you miss the deeper, transformative essence of prayer. And if you should enter into it to humble yourself, you shall not be lifted. That if one approaches prayer with a sole intention of seeking humility or lowering oneself, they will not experience spiritual upliftment or elevation. Gibran emphasizes that true prayer is not about self-deprecation or diminishing oneself, but rather about genuine communion with the divine, which can lead to spiritual growth and a deeper connection with the sacred. Or even if you should enter into it to beg for the good of others, you shall not be heard. Even if one enters into prayer with the intention of interceding for the benefit of others, their prayers may not be answered in the traditional sense. Gibran suggests that prayer should not be seen as a transactional act where requests are made in exchange for divine intervention. Instead, Gibran implies that the effectiveness of prayer lies not in asking for specific outcomes, but in fostering a deeper spiritual relationship and trust in the divine order. It is enough that you enter the temple invisible. Simply entering the invisible temple of prayer is sufficient in itself. Gibran implies that the act of engaging in prayer, regardless of the outcome or specific intentions, holds intrinsic value. It underscores the idea that prayer is not solely about asking for favors or seeking specific outcomes, but about cultivating a relationship with the divine. I cannot teach you how to pray in words. The Prophet admits that he cannot provide a formulaic way to pray. The Prophet acknowledges that prayer is a deeply personal and spiritual practice that transcends mere instruction or verbal teaching. It is about a profound connection with the divine and intimate dialogue of the soul. God listens not to your words save when he himself utters them through your lips. This line suggests that true prayer is not merely about the words spoken or recited by individuals. Gibran implies that God listens most attentively when the words uttered by a person are inspired or guided directly by God's presence within them. It underscores the idea that the most impactful prayers come from a place of deep spiritual connection, where individuals are aligned with a divine purpose and speak from a place of sincerity, faith, and authenticity. And I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and the forests and the mountains. The Prophet acknowledges that he cannot teach the natural prayers of the world around us. Gibran suggests that the prayers inherent in nature are beyond human ability to teach or fully comprehend. These natural elements express their connection to the divine in ways that are innate and profound, rooted in their very existence and interaction with the cosmos. But you, who are born of the mountains and the forests and the seas, can find their prayer in your heart. Gibran suggests that humans, who are born of and intimately connected with the mountains, forests, and seas, carry with them the essence of nature's prayers. He implies that our existence is intertwined with the natural world, and therefore we have the capacity to understand and resonate with the silent prayers expressed by these elements. This statement encourages us to recognize and embrace our deep spiritual connection with nature. And if you but listen in the stillness of the night, you shall hear them saying in silence. In the quiet of the night, one can hear the silent prayers of nature. Our God, who art our winged self, it is thy will in us that willeth. In this statement, Gibran presents a concept where God is understood not only as an external entity, but also as an intrinsic part of human existence. The phrase our winged self suggests that God resides within us as a part of our essence or soul. It implies that our true nature is inherently connected to the divine, and through this connection our actions and desires are aligned with God's will. The phrase, "It is thy will in us that willeth," further emphasizes this unity. It suggests that our will and desires are guided by the divine will that dwells within us. This concept invites contemplation on the idea that our true purpose and intentions are rooted in our spiritual nature and connection with God. It is thy desire in us that desireth. Similarly, this line suggests that the desires we feel are influenced by the divine presence within us. It implies that our deepest longings and aspirations are connected to God's presence and guidance within our hearts and minds. It is thy urge in us that would turn our nights, which are thine, into days, which are thine also. This expresses the idea that the motivation and energy we feel to overcome challenges and turn difficult times into better ones come from the divine presence within us. It suggests that God's influence helps us navigate through tough situations and transform them into periods of growth and positivity. We cannot ask thee for aught, but thou knowest our needs before they are born in us. God comprehends our needs even before we are aware of them ourselves. It conveys the idea that God's knowledge and understanding surpasses our own, making our prayers less about asking for specific things and more about aligning ourselves with the divine will and guidance that already encompasses our needs. Thou art our need, and in giving us more of thyself, thou givest us all. God is the ultimate fulfillment of all our needs. It suggests that by deepening our connection with the divine, we receive everything essential for our spiritual and earthly well-being. So what were my biggest takeaways in this? 1. God is within us and everything. 2. God listens when words are said with God's presence in them. 3. Build a relationship with God.